The moon landing being debunked. One giant lie. Why so many people still think the moon landings were faked? Apollo 11 didn't happen. Humans never set foot on the moon. Heard all this before? So in this video I will help to debunk moon landing conspiracy theories. If you are new here, please subscribe my YouTube channel and turn on notification bell icon. Alright, conspiracy theories surrounding the moon landings have proved worryingly persistent in the 50 years since Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin took their first small steps on the lunar surface. NASA's landmark achievement is still being challenged. Despite there being a wealth of information online debunking these conspiracy theories, the cries of hoax continue. Why? We find ourselves awash in an ocean of information online. National Space Center Discovery Director Professor Anu Oja said during a 2019 lecture in Greenwich. There has been more data produced in the last 2 years than in the whole of human history. This information ocean is getting more turbulent every single day, he continued. The only tools we have to navigate through this maelstrom are the critical thinking skills that we are trying to develop in people as scientists. So, how can science help to debunk moon landing conspiracy theories? Conspiracy Theory 1. Shadows in the moon landing photos prove the images were faked. Take a look at the image below and at the full panorama on the NASA website. Look closely at the shadows cast by astronaut Neil Armstrong and another object just out of shot. What's wrong with them? They're not parallel. This image has been taken as proof by conspiracy theorists that the moon landings were faked. Surely if the sun were the only light source, then the shadows should be parallel? Doesn't this prove that the whole scene was mocked up in a studio, with multiple light sources creating different shadow patterns? Well, no. This is on the surface of the moon, but we can reproduce this effect anytime we want to on Earth, Prof. Oja explains. You have all seen this phenomenon yourself, where because of perspective, parallel lines appear to be non-parallel. If you are trying to reduce onto a two-dimensional plane, a three-dimensional situation, you can make lines do all sorts of weird things. Artists have been using this for centuries. Go outside when the sun is low in the sky and see this effect for yourself. Just like the images from Apollo 11, the shadows will not be parallel. Conspiracy status. Debunked Conspiracy Theory 2. Apollo astronauts could not have survived Earth's radiation field. Earth is surrounded by a zone of charged particles known as the Van Allen radiation belt. These are regions surrounding the Earth in our magnetic field where high-energy trapped particles from the sun tend to get confined, Prof. Oja says. What that means is if you are going into these regions, there are extremely high radiation concerns. If that is the case, how did the Apollo astronauts travel through the Van Allen radiation belt and out of Earth's orbit unharmed? Surely the amount of radiation would have killed them. Doesn't this prove that the moon landings were a hoax? Prof. Oja has a killer reply. My answer to that is firewalking, he says. If you've ever done firewalking, you'll know the one thing you don't do is linger around in the middle of the fire pit. You cross as quickly as you can. From a science point of view, as long as you walk across quite quickly, looking at the thermal conductivity of your feet, you're not going to have enough thermal energy going into the soles of your feet to burn you. You're absolutely fine. Just don't hang around in the middle. In a similar way, the transit time through the Van Allen radiation belt right at the beginning of the Apollo voyages was incredibly short. Traveling through the Van Allen radiation belt if you are going fast enough, which you need to be if you're going to the moon, is no problem whatsoever. Conspiracy status. Debunked Conspiracy Theory 3. Why are there no stars in pictures of the NASA moon landings? Here is another moon landing photograph which has caught conspiracy theorists' eye. If the image really was taken on the moon, shouldn't the sky be filled with stars? After all, there is no atmosphere to distort the image, no clouds to interrupt that glorious view. Conspiracy theorists argue that the lack of stars in the Apollo 11 mission photographs prove that the event was staged. NASA could not have faked the full wonder of the lunar sky, and so they simply chose not to include any stars at all. Here's another solution. Both the astronauts and the lunar landscape itself are brightly lit by the sun. The sky may look black, but remember, this is in fact daytime on the moon. If you're going to take a photo of a brightly lit scene, your camera's shutter speed needs to be fast and your aperture incredibly small. In that situation, faint objects like stars simply aren't going to show up. Conspiracy status. Debunked conspiracy theory 4. The Apollo 11. US flag is waving in the wind, but there's no wind on the moon. One of the crowning moments in terms of US national pride was seeing the stars and stripes on the surface of the moon, Prof. Oher says. Buzz Aldrin saluting the proudly waving American flag on the moon remains one of the iconic images of the Apollo 11 mission, a declaration of US supremacy over space race rivals the Soviet Union. But if there is no atmosphere on the moon, there is no wind, so why is the flag waving? Look again at the image, and in particular along the top edge of the flag, and you will find the answer. A telescopic pole has been extended along the top in order to make the flag fly proudly. Yes, NASA really did think of everything. Because it's been set up like this, it appears to be waving in the wind, Oher explains. All the wrinkles are there because it's literally been screwed up for 4 days en route to the moon. Conspiracy status. Debunked conspiracy theory 5. If we really went to the moon in 1969, why have we never been back? Apollo 17, the last Apollo mission to land astronauts on the moon, took place in 1972. Since then, humans have never returned. Maybe that's because we never went to the moon in the first place. Apollo 17 wasn't meant to be the end of the story, of course. Throughout the 1970s, there were ambitions to establish a permanent lunar base before turning to the next major space exploration challenge, Mars. It never happened. But this was no grand conspiracy. This was geopolitics. The answer is we changed our priorities, Oher says, from a combination of the Vietnam War, but also there was this geopolitical element of thinking, we've won the race. Just as we'd got good at doing science on the moon, we abandoned it. Instead, attention turned to the Space Shuttle program and, latterly, the International Space Station, which has been permanently inhabited by teams of astronauts since November 2000. But that doesn't mean humans couldn't return to the moon in the future. Conspiracy status. Debunked as the moon landing is being debunked, and it is becoming clear that it was a fake event. Here we break down some more of the most enduring conspiracy theories about the moon landing and why there's no evidence to support them. 1. The moon landing is fake because the American flag looks like it is flapping in the wind. If you look at the American flag in still pictures from the Apollo 11 mission, it appears to be flapping in the wind. But how can that be, since there's no wind on the moon? The simple answer is, it isn't flapping, Feinberg says. That's because it isn't an ordinary flag. If the astronauts had planted a regular flag on the moon, it would have hung slack like flags do on Earth when there's no wind. This wouldn't make for a very appealing photo, so NASA designed special flags for astronauts to take with them. All 6 Apollo missions that made it to the moon planted an American flag there. These flags had a horizontal rod inside to make them stick out from the flagpole. The Apollo 11 astronauts had trouble extending the rod all the way, and in still pictures, this creates a ripple effect that makes the flag look like it's waving in the wind. In video images of the flag, you can see it only moves while the astronauts are grinding it into the moon's surface. After the astronauts step away, it stays in the same bent shape because of the partially extended rod. 2. The moon landing is fake because you can't see the stars. One of the first arguments I heard, and one of the easiest to debunk, is the fact that there are no stars in the lunar sky, Feinberg says. Or rather, there are no stars in the pictures that Armstrong and Aldrin took on the moon. But if you've ever used a camera before, it's easy to understand why. All of the exposures of the astronauts on the moon are daylight exposures, he explains. The surface was brightly illuminated, and the astronauts are wearing bright white spacesuits that are highly reflective. The exposure on the astronauts' cameras was too short to capture the spacesuits and the moon's surface while also capturing the comparatively dimmer stars. The same thing happens if you go onto someone's back porch at night and turn on the lights. Even though you can see the stars from where you're standing, a quick exposure camera won't be able to capture them. 3. The moon landing is fake because the shadows aren't right. In images from the moon landing, it is possible to see certain objects even though they are in shadow. Skeptics argue that if the sun were the only source of light, this wouldn't be the case. Therefore, the fact that you can see some objects in shadow must be the result of special Hollywood lighting. The problem with this theory is that although the sun is the main source of illumination on the moon, it isn't the only source of illumination. Another source is the lunar ground, which reflects the sun's light. In the Apollo 11 pictures, the sunlight is being scattered or reflected off the ground every which way, and some of it, a small fraction but enough to be able to see, scatters into the shadows, Feinberg says. This is why, in some images, you can make out a plaque that Armstrong and Aldrin left on the moon, even though it's lying in shadow. 4. The moon landing is fake because you can't see Armstrong's camera. In one of the pictures from the moon landing, you can see Armstrong clearly reflected in Aldrin's visor. Some skeptics have pointed out that Armstrong does not appear to be holding a camera, so someone else must be taking the picture. But that isn't true. Armstrong couldn't walk around the moon with a regular handheld camera. In his bulky suit, he needed something that was easy to manipulate. The camera he used on the moon was mounted on the front of his suit, which is where his hands are in the reflection. 5. The moon landing is fake because Stanley Kubrick filmed it. Director Stanley Kubrick's film 2001, A Space Odyssey, wowed audiences in 1968 for creating a realistic image of outer space. It was so compelling that some conspiracy theorists later wondered if the government had actually hired Kubrick to film the moon landing in a soundstage, possibly like the one James Bond ran through in the 1971 film Diamonds Are Forever. The thing is, the moon landing footage didn't look real because Kubrick filmed it. Kubrick's movie 2001 looked real because Kubrick enlisted astronomical artists and aerospace engineers to help him with it. The only evidence that Kubrick filmed the moon landing has itself proved to be a hoax. Denial of America's great progress in space exploration and belief in these myths is more of an ideological thing, a political thing, than it is a scientific thing, Feinberg notes. To those who know the moon landing was real, conspiracy theories that it was a hoax may seem silly and innocuous, but their consequences aren't. They spread misinformation, make people susceptible to other false theories, and could earn you a punch from Buzz Aldrin. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share for more interesting videos. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. If there is any other conspiracy videos you guys would like for me to do, put some ideas in the comments section. Thank you for watching.